I've known Francesco for a while now, even when he was doing his PhD, I think. And I know he's very passionate about public space and always worked on public space a lot. So this conference is actually very fitting for Francesco to be organizing. Francesco is an architect and urban designer, and since 2013, he is an assistant professor at the School of Architecture at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Francesco graduated with honors from the Faculty of Architecture and University of Napoli, Federico, to obtaining a master's degree in architecture. In 2014, he completed cum laude his PhD in urbanism from Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona Tech, UPC. His work has given rise to a series of publications, journal articles, book chapters, conference presentations, installations, and international exhibitions, including the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2006, the Tianjin Design Week in China, 2015, 2017, and 19, the Placemaking Week in Amsterdam, 2017, the Singapore Urban Design Festival, 2018, the World Forum, Urban Forum 9 in Kuala Lumpur, 2019, and the Business of Design Week in Hong Kong in 2018 and 19. Before joining CUHK, Francesco has participated in different research and teaching programs, collaborating with the University of Napoli, Federico, second, and Politecnico di Milano, Barcelona Tech UPC, and Tongji University in Shanghai. In 2020, he was appointed as adjunct assistant professor at Columbia University in the GSAPP's urban planning program. In addition to his research and teaching activities over the last 20 years, he gained considerable professional experience working for numerous international practices in Italy, Spain, and China, realizing projects related to architecture and urban design. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen now. As you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
I think it's right. Okay.
Okay, so I think what I would like to address is just exactly what I feel here is about the first, the topic, by answering the topic of this session, which, as you can see, it's bottom-up approaches and informal urban activities. So could theory inform or better inform practice? I think one of the maybe the starting point from these lectures could be one of the research projects I did in Hong Kong in 2015, which was conceived to explore how the use of tactical urban actions can be a tool for promoting new social relationship among the citizens. So here you can see some of the outcome of this urban design intervention. Actually, this project was designed to be flexible and movable. So, and how the use of tactical urban design intervention can be somehow a strategy to transform lifeless or dysfunctional public space into something more vibrant. So I think this project was quite interesting to me because it was a kind of idea of bringing disrupting the behavior in public space. So you have 27 small plastic cubes in a box of 1 cubic meter. And I think these cubes are distributed in the space. And then the possibility of moving these informal seatings, they provide a sort of playful components which generates a different moment of social aggregation. So during the intervention, the people have to interact with the installation by taking the cubes out of the box and by moving the cubes that are already distributed by different users. I think we tried this in different spaces in Hong Kong. I think We collect the data of this research, which has been published in the Journal of Urban Design. Maybe I later will give you a link about the research paper I produced after this study. Let's say that once they are installed in a public space, this project acts as a sort of external stimulus by providing a social bond between people and encouraging them to talk and socialize with each other, basically. But I think I would like to introduce something new here. So if we look at these pictures, we can see clearly three key elements, or for these lectures, I will call parts. So the people, right? So you can see the cubes, which are the design intervention, but also you can see as a background the space. So in a way, all these parts form an assemblage. Here I'm going to go a little bit far away on the theory, and I think this is quite inspiring to me. So according to the Luce-Gattari, in an assemblage, the parts has to form a whole that has an additional value. So I think they explain this concept by using an example of a warrior on a horse with a blade, you know? And they say that this constitutes a powerful assemblage, which is more than the sum of its singular parts. So I think the parts amplify the message, and I think the assemblage has this kind of elements, right? So I think we can analyze even that image that I was showing as an assemblage. I will explain why is an assemblage. So I think one of the key property of the assemblage is the emergent property, which according to the philosopher Manuel de Landa is a property of a whole that arises from the interactions between the parts. So the part must interact, and in those interactions, they will demonstrate the capacity they have. So without interactions, the emergent property will disappear. I think this is an intervention I did in Singapore during the Urban Design Festival. And I think when we are, let's say, intervene in a public space, we are somehow creating a temporary assemblage where the parts interact, amplifying themselves. So we can observe somehow that image of the warriors even in this collection of parts that in our public space interact each other, no? I think what is very relevant is the very concept of this assemblage, right? That implies the existence of some sort of emergent force that generate the relationship between elements. Otherwise, the assemblage would cease to exist. I think under this lens, we can observe, for example, some of the public space in Central District of Hong Kong, which actually is the object of my research. So if we look at the condition of some of the open spaces in Hong Kong, as you can see, and based on the premises of assemblage, they seem that in this space, the parts are not interacting each other. So also because often the people is missing. So one of the key components is not there, or at least if it's there, is not contributing to interact with other parts of the spaces. So as a consequence, this is not possible to define them according to the theory and assemblage, right? I think those spaces that are being studied, they represent a critical resource in high density city like Hong Kong, and they should have a primary role in creating place attachment and connecting people and the community. But sometimes these spaces are not able to do so. So I think in some of this space, really, when we observe with our study, we really cannot see this vibrancy that usually, I mean, a public space should have. So it's paradoxically, it's just Hong Kong government that I quote, that declared that open space in old urban area tend to be small, fragmented, sometimes hidden, making them unpopular and defeating their purposes. I think this is something that we also discussed yesterday. So on the other hand, we have in the city spaces that are like, for example, in this case, back alleys, stairs, and residual urban area that are more vibrant. So of the formal public space. So you can see some example, right? I think in a general, we can see how this tricky element, which is the space, the design, even with this sort of, informal adaptations of the space, right? I don't want to say that has to be a design, but I think it's like the things that also Jimena, discussed, no? Sometimes it's not the design, but it's a small adaptation of the people in public space. Let's say that somehow these spaces are less rigid and more integrated into the urban context. And even though they don't have the so-called facilities like playground or seating, somehow they are able to attract different type of users. I think another point that I would like to highlight here, that is the narrative about the role and condition of public spaces in Hong Kong is certainly far from positive. Even if we compare, let's say, the most important Asian metropolis, we can observe how Hong Kong has the lowest amount of public space per person. And also, let's say, as a remark in the Hong Kong Public Standard and Guideline, the pressure for land is extreme in Hong Kong. So, however, the government has recognized how public space play an essential role in the high density built environment of the city. So I think these are the premises that, let's say, move my investigation. And I think the research I did let's say, because I'm still working on, I'm to shed the light on the factors that have led to a negative perception of and the use of these spaces, and also discover some positive characteristic that may indicate a new direction in the development of a more, let's say, inclusive urban environment. So let's say a combination of methods, empirical methods, was used to evaluate the spaces in Hong Kong Central and Western District with the idea to have a more deep understanding of the condition of these spaces. So I think what we did in the past is to study almost all the public space, the official public space managed by the Leisure and Culture Service Department, which is the government department. And those spaces, let's say, provide different type of facilities and are in large part sitting out areas, pocket parks, and children playground. So this 27 case study cover almost, as I said, all the public spaces in Hong Kong. And I divided them in different categories. And for example, I divide them by size. So there's like a mini open space, small open space, medium and large. Also these posts, let's say the public open space, were divided according to, let's say, the categories, the label done by the Leisure and Culture Service Department. As I say, children playground, sitting out areas, and park and rest garden. So I think we did an extensive research work to try to analyze those spaces. So during the spatial analysis, we used photographs, sketches, and different set of dimensions were taken to examine the configuration of those open space and their components. So the analysis of even materials, urban furniture, spatial layout was used to create a sort of inventory of the most recurring elements in a way to have a more, let's say, comprehensive understanding of their common design practice. So a part of this study, which was more on the space, we also study the social, let's say, characteristics. So we went to visit those places by using multiple surveys, which are based on time sampling techniques, just to obtain more information about the usage of those public open space. So we use empirical observation methods, time-lapse video, tracking and counting public space users. And also, of course, we collect the information of people behavior in public space. So this is some of the example. I mean, we did this for all the 27 open space. So I think I have a bunch of data that I will not discuss in detail here, otherwise it would be another lectures. But I think the result of this work are under publishing. So I think I hope soon will be out, so you will see a more detail what this study is about. So I think during the fieldwork, we use time, as I say, video analysis. Also, the data collected, generates also patterns in the use of the space. So we were able to understand, the distribution of people, also circulation flows. And also, I think that was quite necessary. I mean, the colors that you can see here are different type of space. So the green is the park and rest garden. The orange is like sitting out area, and the yellow is the playground, the children playground, and the blue one are the, let's say, the more formal square. So we know that the use of the city, especially between weekdays and Sunday, changed a lot for the Filipino and Indonesian communities. So you can see the light gray is the use of Sunday, and the dark gray is use of weekdays. And you can see in some of the spaces, so the incremental of, Sunday and weekdays is particularly relevant. So this is the area that is called, let's say, Little Manila, where, the domestic workers used to together. So we also observed the flows, right? So the empirical observation revealed how the post usage during the weekdays and weekend, let's say the weekdays and Sunday. So here a distribution of, let's say, the users. So we have local resident, local resident, elderly, domestic workers, and children, according to space, and also all these 27. And you can see how, for example, the change on Sunday, the domestic workers population really became relevant. And I think these graphics are quite interesting in understanding a little bit more about how these spaces are used. So just to not take so much time about it, I would like just to say that this observation reveal, let's say, tell us a lot of this space, and clarifying some of the reason why these spaces are not attracting users. So some of these findings say that, let's say, the rigid layout organization, the disconnection from the pedestrian flows, or even the lack of active frontage, right? I mean, those spaces, sometimes there's no interaction between public and private realm. And I think these are some of the common problems that we found in this project. Of course, I think a little bit more research has to be done to fully understand, more characteristics. But I think that the point is that after we collect all this data, this is lead to the second part of my research, which is ongoing, right? I think the ones you have seen now, it's more the past, but I think the one that you see now is the future, right? It's like the transition. So after having collected the data and know more about how this space work and understand also weaknesses, but as well potentiality. So my research question is focused on how, improve these spaces. So what we can do, how to implement a strategy to reconnect people in public space, how to bring that key element of the assemblage that is relevant to create a place, I think. So here you can see a little bit the strategy that I would like to implement, and now sometimes is a bit blocked for the COVID situation. So is to develop a participatory strategy to engage the local community in transforming these spaces and explore how the use of temporary urban design intervention can be used to address critical issues and challenges at the district level. So what we aim to do is to basically test urban prototypes in selected public space. And we will collect data, again, more specific, to understand how the specific space could be upgraded to meet the community needs. So one of the aims of the research is to reconnect, as I said, people in public space, also by acknowledging the small adaptations that the citizen will make on the urban environment. So this concept, let's say, allow the integration of the local knowledge, because we will work with the community, into the planning process. And let's say, become an access that can offer opportunity for alternative and innovative process of engagement. So I think this would be the idea, right? To monitor the differences between, before the implementation, during the implementation, and after the implementation. So in a way that the impact of this intervention will be examined. And we will try to empirically evaluate the impact that this project have on the space and the people behavior. So the idea that I was trying to work is to measure that emergent property, which I discussed before in the assemblage, which allow the interaction between parts, and that is a key element of the assemblage. So I think in a way the theory can help a little bit to understand maybe how we can implement, and upgrading some spaces and have a more vibrancy. So here is somehow the timeline of this research. So I'm planning to implement each project in different, let's say, type of public space. So the idea is to have 3 prototypes for 3 types of public space. And as you can see, we have different tasks. So we have participatory process, which include the community. Then we have the implementation of the design projects. And then we have the evaluation of the project. So it's a sort of cycle that can be adjusted and implemented again, right? It's a sort of cycle. So this is what, in what can be, right? So the idea, just to highlight here, is when we intervene in public space, implementing this temporary urban intervention, we create assemblages, temporary assemblages, which in large part of the case, as you can see in all intervention around the world, they are generating the emergent property that we discuss. But of course, we can observe how the people are engaged by the design and how they interact within the space and also with other users. But the question here, which is very relevant, that I really would like to find an answer, is how to implement long-term improvement. So how can this temporary urban strategy could be used in a more systematic way and thereby generate, just be used in as a planning tool for planners and government departments. So I think this will be the goal of the research. I think just to come back on the first slides of the lectures again. So I think this, despite the contribution of these bottom-up approaches, it is necessary to develop a conceptual framework to study how this transformation can influence the urban environment. So by referring to the notion of assemblage as a theoretical lens to understand the complexities of this urban phenomena, my research is try to shed light on the impact that this temporary urban intervention can have in creating new social-spatial relationship with the existing urban component, and let's say making place for social interaction. I think that the approach that I'm trying to outline here try to address the lack of social interaction within public spaces in Hong Kong by establishing a sort of participatory mechanism where temporary urban design intervention can be a good strategy to transform this public space in something more vibrant. So just to conclude, as applied urban research, this study tried to generate findings that will contribute to address, questions that are practical. But the strategy that I propose also seeks to generate evidence that can be used also in theory. So the concept of making place that I show here, basically, in a way, will guide the community to transform the urban environment. And I think I would like just to conclude with paraphrasing Colin McFarland, that argues that assemblage can be applied to the city in terms of making urbanism. And as such, in a sort of open process, assemblage can be seen a sort of imaginative way of considering not just city are, but how the city might one day be. Thank you so much. I hope to be in time of this lecture.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesco. You saved us a bit over here. And
Okay.
very